We're going to be talking about a variety of analyses centered around ninth grade, and in the interest of time, I'm going to just say some stuff and not support it. So there's lots of evidence that ninth grade is really important. It's a pivotal year in the educational trajectory of young people. Students can hit ninth grade looking like things are going well and then have difficulties. Sometimes those difficulties are more predictable, sometimes they're less predictable. And in the school district of Philadelphia, we have been focusing on ninth grade quite a bit in the recent last couple of years. But the story I'm going to talk about today begins with some work that was done in Chicago. So in 2003, Chicago Public Schools adopted a new metric for ninth grade success and adopted it into their accountability metric. And the metric that they chose was grounded in some research that was being done by the Chicago Consortium. And then in turn, once it was established, it became the basis of ongoing research. And the punchline of this is that this ninth grade metric is strongly associated with on-time graduation. So those students that meet this metric are much more likely to graduate in 4 years than those that do not meet the Chicago metric. And this is the metric that Chicago has been using. They call it their freshman on-track indicator. And a student meets this if he or she fails no more than one semester in a core course and earns at least 5 credits by the end of freshman year. So once adopting this, CPS has since used this metric as a way of driving continuous improvement within the district and to track success. And they have had success. Since adopting this, on-track rates, ninth grade on-track rates have risen substantially since during the period between 2007 and 2015. At the same time, on-time graduation rates have also risen substantially. And anytime people in our business hear about rising graduation rates, we always want to know whether this simply reflects a reduction in standards. And the answer appears to be no, that in Chicago there's also research that suggests that these students are having a greater degree of success after graduation, which implies that the diplomas that they're getting are legitimate. This is some information that's coming from the To and Through project, which is built for many of the players in the Chicago landscape. And we in district have had the opportunity to collaborate with people from the To and Through project on this, what I'm about to talk about today. We've had their experience and insight as we've moved forward on this. Because we recognize that this has worked very nicely in Chicago and that there are a number of benefits to having this kind of a well-established, well-grounded, evidence-based metric for ninth grade success, including, all right, well, if ninth grade on-track metric is predictive of graduation rates, it gives you a little bit of a sense of what your graduation rates are likely to be in a few years and opportunities to try to do something to improve those rates. It also provides sort of a definition of what ninth grade success is, a standard for that. And that may seem abstract, but in fact it's incredibly useful and important when you start talking about continuous improvement. So if you have a firm definition of ninth grade success that you trust, that you think is based in meaningful kinds of underlying principles, that allows you, for example, to improve your improvement process of ninth grade itself. One of the other speakers in this session, Fatima Fulmore, will be talking about some of the things that School District of Philadelphia is doing around ninth grade. It's been an area of significant district focus the last couple of years. Having this in place will allow us to monitor whether those implementations are successful and to modify them and improve them going forward. It also allows us to speak something about preparation for ninth grade. So it's this sort of pivotal linchpin point in education. If we know what ninth grade success looks like, we can ask questions about eighth grade. What kind of an eighth grade experience positions someone to be successful in ninth grade? Austin will be talking about some work he's been doing about looking at eighth grade indicators of ninth grade success. We have a complicated district. We assume that things will not be exactly the same across our schools. Having this also will allow us to differentiate across different schools and across different subgroups of students. Looking forward, this should provide us with an improved framework to deal with 10th, 11th, 12th grades, and the list goes on. Okay, so Chicago has had success with their metric. We would like to incorporate that into our framework. However, we know that through experience that sometimes something that is evidence-based and has a track record elsewhere does not necessarily transplant directly, immediately, without modification into Philadelphia. And just as a quick example, one of the elements of the Chicago OnTrack definition was can't fail more than one semester. In Chicago, semester grades have a sort of a credit implication that they do not have in Philadelphia. So out of the gate, we know that that piece is not going to map directly. So for this and other reasons, we felt before we moved forward, we wanted to establish and validate a Philadelphia-specific metric of ninth grade OnTrack. All right, so many researchers of many stripes in the room, so I want to clarify what we're going to talk about. The reason you are building evidence, the goal that you have, has implications for how you go about your research business. In our case, the motivation is to identify the best available indicator of ninth grade success as defined in terms of on-time graduation for our district, so for Philadelphia. This means that the best indicator, what we're looking for, is something that, first of all, is concise. If you want it to be used consistently, it needs to be applicable across many contexts. It has to be easy to communicate, easy to track, easy to message. But it also needs to be robust. It has to work across many contexts. It can't just be sort of tailor-made for some, but largely inapplicable to other parts of our landscape. This means that we are not focusing or optimizing our process to do things like test or develop theory. These are all noble and fantastic research agendas. At other points in my life, I've been more in this kind of activities. We're not trying to create knowledge that generalizes as widely as possible. We're trying to be specific to Philadelphia. We're not trying to establish causal warrants. All of those things, maybe this work will contribute to those things in some way, but we're not targeting those. So this, to spoil the ending, there's the punchline. This is, after the work I'm going to describe, this is where we landed. In Philadelphia, we think that the best metric of ninth grade OnTrack is that a first-time ninth grader will be considered on track if he or she earns at least one credit in each of the 4 core areas, math, English, science, social studies, plus one additional credit from any source. And by any source, I mean it could be an elective, it could be another core class, it could be a foreign language, any credit at all. So the way we went about this was with some cohort-based analyses. So I'll start by talking about some multiple regression that we did. And when I say cohort, what I mean is identifying all of the students that in a particular year were first-time ninth graders in the district. And that gets sort of frozen, that becomes a cohort that we're gonna analyze. And if they are first-time ninth graders in year X, we're gonna ask the question whether they graduated in year X plus 3, so 4 years of high school. So this means the data is restricted to people that we have all of that data for. And then we tested a wide range of ninth grade indicators that plausibly might be good predictors of on-time graduation. And again, there's a lot of literature to support or to help guide these decisions, controlling for a variety of demographic factors. We looked at some ninth grade achievement metrics like course grades or standardized test scores. Ninth grade behavior metrics, particularly attendance and whether students were suspended or not. And because of the nature of the Chicago OnTrack metric, we were interested in variations of the credit accumulation information or data. And our goal was not to find an individual model with the most predictive power. The goal was to find, all right, so let's back up a second. With multiple regression modeling, you can impose a variety of assumptions that sometimes change your outcomes. You can include or choose to not include various individual variables which might affect things. We did a lot of that, which if we're trying to find the best predictive model has sort of phishing implications that are not necessarily a good idea. But we're not trying to do that. We're trying to learn what are the indicators that don't seem to care which assumptions we adopt, which elements that we include in the model or not. What are the things that assert themselves pretty much regardless of the model, as factors that are likely to predict on-time graduation. And here is an example of one of those models, combined data from 2 cohorts, over 15,000 students. And starting at the bottom, GPA was one of those factors that consistently emerged. To decipher this, if you had a 9th grade GPA of at least 3.0, your odds of graduating on time are about 2.5 times what they would be if you did not. Attendance in this model, a little bit stronger, about 3 times. If your attendance was above 90%, about odds were 3 times as great. But if you met that 9th grade on-track definition that I just mentioned, over 4.5 times. So the winner. We also did some CART modeling. I'm short on time, so I won't get into the details of this, but it sort of confirmed what we were finding through the multiple regression. The way this works is the software will identify for you, give me one value on one variable that does the best job of dividing those that are going to graduate on time from those that do not. And again, multiple sets of parameters, different cohorts, and over again, credits came out as the #1 most discriminating variable. And credits right around 5, sometimes it's 5.1, but basically, again, consistent with the definition. And then this is, if we apply this definition to the last 3 graduating cohorts, so people that were 9th graders in 2011, 2012, graduated 4 years later. The most recent class were 9th graders in 2013, 2014. You can see that students that met those criteria in 9th grade versus those that did not, there's a 40 to 45 percentage point differential in the likelihood that those students would graduate on time. So this in the business is what we call good discriminatory properties. So I'll leave you with a few caveats before I turn it over to the other speakers. In Philadelphia, if a student earns 5 credits, they can be promoted to 10th grade, which means it's possible to be on target for promotion, even though you're not on track for graduation. So an example would be a 9th grader that loads up on electives might earn 5 credits, but they're backing themselves into a corner in terms of satisfying like math requirements, English requirements, and so on. Second, this is important. Our definition of being on track in 9th grade should be viewed as the minimum standard of success in 9th grade. So for example, I just told you it's okay if that 5th credit is an elective. That does not mean we're saying it should be an elective, and we're certainly not saying it must be an elective. 4 cores and an elective is good. 4 cores and a foreign language, for example, is even better. And we're not saying get them 5 credits and then stop. 5 credits, good. 6 credits, even better. And last thing, I've been talking today about a 9th grade on-track metric, which is a graduation indicator. It's predictive of graduation. Not exactly the same thing as a college readiness indicator. We recognize that. Again, back to to and through, the research in Chicago has suggested that the best indicator to predict graduation is not necessarily the same as the best indicator to predict post-graduation success. So we recognize that as future work that we need to do in order to complete the picture with our students. And I will stop there. Thank you.